So here's how I got my tattoo. Several years ago, Donna and I decided we were going to go out and we were going to get spiritual tattoos. And so...
Did we actually talk about it before we went?
We did.
We said spiritual tattoos?
Yes.
Okay, just so that's clear.
That is clear.
Okay.
So when we were looking for something to do, back in the days before we became Christians, we started playing co-ed volleyball. And we played co-ed volleyball. It didn't matter whether we played on the sand, the grass, the hard court, mud volleyball. We just played it constantly. So the more we played it, the more addicted I got, the more I wanted to be a part of playing. And so it didn't matter whether we were playing in the mud or in sand. I'd go after a ball. It didn't matter where. I ran into bushes after hitting a bush trying to get a ball. I have tripped over concrete and slid across that trying to get to a ball to hit it back. Donna went first. And she got an eagle soaring with the word Isaiah 40:31 underneath it. So then it was my turn. I went in and sat down and I told the tattoo artist that I was looking for, something kind of spiritual. And he said, okay, well, what else are you interested in? And I said, well, I love volleyball. I play a lot of volleyball, and kind of went into this whole story of how I play volleyball almost 3 times a week. And he's like, well, maybe you should get a volleyball tattoo. And in my head, I'm thinking, no, I came in here for a spiritual tattoo, but yeah, I really like the idea of a volleyball tattoo. So I happened to have a picture of a guy who played volleyball back then named Karch Karai, and I showed him the picture, and he says, oh, I can do that real quick.
You actually walk around with a picture of that guy?
I did. I had it then. I told you, I was addicted to volleyball. So I sat down in the chair, and he free draws the picture, and he proceeds to start tattooing me. And about halfway, not even quite halfway, just as he starts doing his outline and everything, he says, I think we can make this look better. And I'm like, okay, I'm all in. At this point in time, I've let him talk me out of a spiritual tattoo, and so now I'm just kind of letting him freewheel. So basically, he finishes the tattoo and does all the coloring, and he says, well, what do you think? And I'm like, In my head, I'm thinking, that's really not spiritual, and that's probably not going to look well or go good for me, but it's kind of cool.
You were not looking at it as he did it?
No, it was hurting. I just kind of looked away.
So you let the man draw on you and didn't look at it?
No, I didn't. So, needless to say, once I left out of the room and went out to see where Donna was, she's like, let me see it. In which case, I pulled up my sleeve and I showed her my tattoo.
Which is a demon.
Which is a demon playing volleyball.
I believe I started yelling first and then crying. And then I got silent, which is worse. But I really did ask him, how could you go in for something spiritual and come out with a demon on your arm? And I'm like, I got an eagle on my back and a Bible verse, and you come out with a demon and a volleyball, and it makes no sense.
So that's where we got to with the bad tattoo, my demon volleyball player on my right shoulder.
It looks worse now.
That is faded as well.
Why would you do this? I got a beautiful eagle, an eagle on my back. Then are we just getting whatever we want now? We're gonna put it on our body? A beautiful, majestic, spiritual eagle, and you thought it was a good idea to get a demon on your arm? Are you serious?
All right, we're in this series about tattoos. And last week, if you weren't here, we looked at what the Bible had to say about tattoos. You know, if you weren't here and you want to really dive into that and discover what God says about it, you can go to our Facebook page or to the Gateway Branson website and watch last week's message. There's a lot of good information in there, I think, about what God has to say about tattoos. And remember, last week I said I wasn't going to tell you to go rush out and get a bunch of tattoos, that we really still need to pray about it and really consider what we're going to get before getting a tattoo. But what we found out last week was that it wasn't a sin issue as long as whatever we got in the way of a tattoo wasn't an idol that we used for an idol, that's something that we put in front of God, or that it went against God. Now, what we discovered was that it was really a heart issue. And I also told you last week that next week I will be getting a tattoo, a real tattoo, right up here on stage. And it's not a gimmicky thing. It's something that I've wanted. It's something that I have come to believe about myself. And I want to be able to use it as a tool for Jesus. And I've prayed about it a lot. I'm a little apprehensive because it has some words in it. And I always get kind of nervous about there being a misspelling. So I hope that it won't be the case next week. We also talked about how tattoos have really become a way of expressing our individuality, that they let the world know of our self-identity. And we said that a self-identity is what we have come to believe to be true about ourselves. The problem is that often these beliefs about ourselves are false. They are lies that have been tattooed on our heart. And we've come to believe these lies so much that we have now believed them to be true about who we are. And we said that the only way we can fix that, or that we have to get help to have those lies removed, is to get help from a skilled artist, somebody that can really remove that body art that went wrong. And we said we have to get help from the real ink master, Jesus. Because, see, he is the master at tattooing us with our true identity. And last week, we talked about that our identities are largely based on information sources from outside of ourselves. So, like from our parents, from our friends, from those closest to us. And that when we receive these messages early in life, they just get tattooed on us because we believe the people who are giving these messages to us are credible and we trust them. And so these lies, these things about us get tattooed on our hearts. And we discovered that when we hear these messages, these lies, over and over and over again, we come to believe them. And we said last week that maybe this was you, that maybe you heard lies about who you are. That growing up, maybe somebody told you that you're ugly, or that you're stupid, or that you're fat, or that you're a failure, or that you're not good enough, or that you're a slut, or that you're whatever it is, fill in the blank. You know, whatever that lie was, you have come to believe that about yourself. See, those lies, they actually end up guiding our behavior. We said because what you do is determined by what you think of you. And what you think of you probably isn't true. The lie, it drives our behavior. It drives how we work, how we act at work, how we interact in relationships. It drives so much about who we are, because what you do is determined by what you think of you. And what you think of you probably isn't true. What you do is determined by what you think of you, and what you think of you probably isn't true. And if our identity doesn't change, we will stay stuck in those same behaviors over and over and over again. See, what you do is determined by what you think of you, and what you think of you probably isn't true. Now, I know that kind of sounds like a tongue twister, but I want us to practice that. I want us to say that out loud because it is so important. So just for fun, embellish me here. Let's just say it one time out loud. We'll put it up here. What you do is determined by what you think of you, and what you think of you probably isn't true. So did you know that the Bible even tells us that? If you have a Bible, we're going to be looking in the Old Testament today. And if you didn't know, the Bible is broke up into two sections. There's an Old Testament and a New Testament. The Old Testament is about life on earth before Jesus, and the New Testament is about life on earth after Jesus came. If you don't have a Bible, we have free, easy-to-read Bibles over there on the connection counter or on the shelf. You can just grab one off there. It's yours to keep. Just take it with you. If you have our Gateway Branson app, you can actually download a Bible right there in the app. And if you don't have a Bible, it's not a big deal because we'll put the verses up here on the screen. So we're going to look in the Old Testament in the book of Proverbs, chapter 19, verse 21. It says this: many are the plans in a person's heart. Do you see this? See, the heart is known as our source of emotions, our will, and even our decision making. If our hearts drive our behaviors, and our hearts have been tattooed with lies about who we are, then we have to have the real ink master, Jesus, to remove those lies and tattoo us with our true identity. So we talked last week and we said the first step in this process was to identify those lies about ourselves. We wrote down those false identities on a little Post-it note, and we stuck them to these boards around the room. And so if you weren't here last week, or maybe you couldn't identify what the lie was, you've got Post-it notes again today, and so you can write it down and still stick them on those boards. See, many of us have identified the lie. So now we need to remove those false identities, those lies from our heart. How do we do that? Last week, we said that we often try to change our behavior with resolutions. You know, after January 1st, I'm going to quit doing this, or I'm going to change my behavior and start doing this, or whatever that is, fill in the blank. We even said sometimes what we'll do is we'll add a little Jesus, right? We'll start going to church and add some Jesus to our life. But what we found out was that Jesus doesn't want to just be added to your life. He wants to turn your life upside down and inside out. Jesus is always seeking people out who aren't where they need to be. And so here's the deal. We can't just add Jesus, because we can't do it with just a little sprinkling of church. We can't do it on our own. We can't do it without the master ink artist. In fact, I know from experience, I can't do it without Jesus. And I know you can't do it without Jesus. Not what we need to do. We're just not capable of doing it on our own. So we know that over time, we've learned many ways to cope with life and to actually defend ourselves or protect our hearts. And a lot of times we do this with ways that aren't mentally or emotionally healthy. Psychologists actually refer to doing this process as using defense mechanisms. For instance, many people have learned to lie in order to protect themselves. Other things we do to protect ourselves is we live in denial because we don't want to face the truth about something. Or we escape with fantasy through pornography or video games. Or we withdraw from people to protect that feeling of feeling rejected or not fitting in. Or we even take our frustrations out on others. And sometimes we even blame others or make excuses for our own poor behavior. See, defense mechanisms are similar to what Paul calls strongholds in the New Testament of the Bible. See, a stronghold is something that has a hold of you so strong. It's a cause or belief that is strongly upheld. In our case, it would be a belief to be false about who we are that leads us to making bad decisions. And Paul actually describes these strongholds in the Bible, and he uses a metaphor of war to describe them. He talks about what's happening in our hearts and our mind and how powerful these strongholds, these lies are. Look what it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 5. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. See, do you see how powerful this is? The battle is actually in our minds. And if we can begin to hold on to the truth that's in our mind, we can change our actions. We can change our behaviors. See, the struggles in our life, they can be overcome with God's help by choosing to believe the truth in our minds. See, that lie that was tattooed about ourselves, that was tattooed on our heart, it was formed at an early age by the environment that we were raised in. And to remove that lie, this passage, Paul, he's talking about that we cannot do it as the world would do it. We cannot do it by trying harder or self-help books. No, that passage says it will take divine power. This passage says it will take divine power to demolish these strongholds. See, we have to demolish these strongholds. We have to destroy them, or they will just come back in our life. You know, I can't tell you how many times I talk to somebody in recovering from meth, and they tell me they're drinking alcohol, or I find out that they're drinking alcohol, and they tell me it's okay because alcohol wasn't their deal, meth was. So I'm not doing meth, I can drink alcohol, I can hang on to the alcohol part. You know, what always happens every time, I have not seen it not happen, it won't be long until the alcohol becomes a stronghold in their life and they're doing meth again, you know. The reason is that they didn't completely destroy that stronghold. The lie isn't simply, I can drink alcohol because meth is my deal. No, the lie is much trickier than that. The lie could be, I need alcohol to cope with the stress in my life, or I need alcohol to be the life of the party, or, you know, everybody in my family drinks and they always will, so I can drink. You know, that lie is going to be telling you something to justify the reason for your stronghold. The other thing that this passage in 2 Corinthians tells us is that we have to take these lies captive. We have to take these lies about who we are and take them captive. This isn't a one and done deal. It's something that we have to do over and over and over. These lies, they've been tattooed on our hearts for a long time. And they're going to continue to resurface over and over and over again. So we have to take those thoughts, those lies captive, and only believe the truth about ourselves. So when those lies come up, we need to counter those lies with truth. We need to say the truth out loud. We need to say it out loud to God. And the more we say it, the more we'll come to believe it. And so I want you to practice with me. And I know it may feel a little weird or a little uncomfortable, but this is the best place to practice because we can practice as a group. And so we're going to put true statements up here on the board. So first, I'm going to tell us, here's the lie. The lie is that nobody will love me. So we want to take that thought, that lie, captive. and we want to say out loud all together, in Jesus, I am accepted and loved because I am a child of God. See, the truth is that God loves you so much, he sent his son Jesus to die for you and me. And I have kids, and I love you guys, but I would not probably send any of my kids to die for you. But God did. That's how much he loves us. Let's do another one. How about the lie that you hear that you are worthless? So we want to take that lie captive, and we say out loud, in Jesus, I have been bought with a price, and I belong to God. See, the truth is, when Jesus gave himself up on that cross and died, he paid the ultimate price for you and me. And you can't pay for something if it doesn't have any value. And you have incredible value. All right, let's do one more. God will never love me because of all the things I've done in my past. So we take that lie captive, and the truth is, in Jesus, I have been restored as God's masterpiece and forgiven of all my wrongs, past, present, and future. See, that's the whole point of Jesus, that you no longer have to remain stuck in your past. God has forgiven you when you become a follower of Jesus. On your seats, on your chairs, in your packet is a card. And on this card, on one side, it says who you are in Christ. These are all statements of truth about how God views you. And on the other side is just a reminder that you are his masterpiece. So take that with you. Keep it handy. Look at it often. And I know you may not believe any of these about yourself, but these are true. So take it with you and put it where you can see it. So we've identified the lies that's been tattooed on our heart. We've taken it captive. We've confessed it out loud about the real truth of who we are. And see, the Bible tells us that confession leads to healing. So now what we have to do is we have to destroy this stronghold that's got a hold of us. So I've got a little illustration, and I'll show you. So let's say this cinder block is our stronghold. Now, last week I shared with you that my stronghold that I've battled with for a long time is not being good enough. And what I would do prior to becoming a follower of Jesus is I would attack my stronghold kind of like this. I'd go out on a Friday or Saturday, I'd get some of these, and I'd do this with my stronghold. And it wouldn't work, you know, or maybe I would get a little more aggressive, and that wouldn't do anything either. You know, this is how many of you have tried to attack your lies as well. Here's the deal. We can't Dr. Phil this. It just doesn't work. 2 Corinthians tells us that we have to destroy or demolish that stronghold. We have to totally incinerate it. And to do that, it says in 2 Corinthians that we have to have divine power. So I've asked my friend, Sensei Eric, to come up here and help me with this. See, 2 Corinthians says we have to have that divine power that only comes from God. This lie, this stronghold has been tattooed on our hearts. And the only way we can get rid of that stronghold is to destroy it like this. Also, Eric's on staff here, so if any of you guys get out of line. Yeah. But see, we have to use divine power. See, you and I, we don't have that kind of power. We can't destroy these strongholds on our own. It won't last. See, the work is not about trying harder. The work is about identifying the lie, taking it captive, confessing the real truth about it, and destroying it with God's divine power. That's the only way we can do it. And to do that, it requires this. And I'm not sure that a lot of us are willing to do the work that it requires. But here's what it requires. It requires us to pray about it daily. We have to pray every day. You're going to say something to God like, God, I need to destroy this stronghold in my life. I can't, but you can.
Can I see that again?
We have to do that every day. And we have to do it many, many times a day. See, you and I we've been believing these lies for so long. We have to replace that lie with the truth until it becomes the dominant thought in our mind. And it may take a long, long time, but it's absolutely essential for living a new life. And by the way, whenever that dark or that evil lie pops up in your head, don't let it discourage you. Instead, use it as a reminder to refocus on the truth about who you are in Jesus. See, it's not a sin to be tempted. You know, who we become is determined by the actions that we do when we're tempted. And so are we going to give up and go right back to our destructive ways? Or will we choose the path of Jesus, the way of truth? So to do all of this, we have to begin to think differently. We have to renounce or declare that lie is no longer who we are. And we have to choose to believe the truth about what God says about us. We have to reprogram our brains. And when we do this, God will transform us. He will renew our minds. And Paul actually tells us that in the New Testament of Romans chapter 12, verse 2. It says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. You see, you are not who you think you are. And when the real ink master, Jesus, removes the lies that have been tattooed on your heart, he begins a transformation and a renewing of your mind through his divine power that allows you to destroy that stronghold so that you can begin to live in your true identity. Watch this.
My life was a drug-fueled chaos. I actually, at 15, I started using meth. I had a close family member introduce meth to me, and so I wasn't a typical 15-year-old doing sports and playing video games. I was getting high. For me, I realized, I was addicted to all mind-altering substances. My problem was I didn't like to be in my own body without being under the influence of something. But when I first tried meth, it was the one that topped all the other ones. It was greater than smoking weed. It was greater than drinking beer. For me, it really itched that bone that I was looking to itch. I hurt a lot of people hurt me. I got in a lot of financial debt. I, caught some felonies along the way. My health was definitely affected in that. and my family above all. That's the thing. When you're in that chaos, the people that suffer the most are the people that are close to you, the ones that love and care about you. You're high, you're numbing yourself, you're not even, feeling the pain. But everybody that cares about you, they're hurting. They're watching you kill yourself, and there's nothing they can do about it. It's like watching somebody drown, and and you have a life vest, but you can't throw it to them. So it's tough. This tattoo right here was created in prison with a cassette player motor, a lighter, and the ink was actually, they call it soot, and it was created from burning a flame, and the smoke actually lands on a surface, and they scrape that black stuff off and mix it with deodorant. And this big skull with vampire teeth actually symbolizes the methamphetamine lifestyle of never sleeping. So it was just and vampires never sleep, so that's where that was. For me, that's, pain and suffering all the way. So that's what that symbolized. I went to a church sermon, and I haven't been to one in years, and God spoke to me, even though I was high on meth at the time, and he just, that very night I gave my life over to the Lord. I cried out to him and just gave up, quit fighting the fight and let him have it. And it took humility above all. It took me knowing that my best thinking got me in the gutter time and time again. So when I humbled myself before God and I let him take control, he restored my whole life. He actually made it brand new. He restored me as a person, and he's blessed me in so many ways. It's ridiculous. I have a beautiful wife today. We own our home today. I'm starting a business, and it's going really well. He grew me up into the man he created me to be. It did take hard work. It took a ton of hard work. I had to bust my butt to get where I'm at today, but he led the whole way. I just chased after him and put one foot in front of the other, did the next right thing after the next right thing, and the results are, the proof's in the pudding. But the coolest thing about this tattoo was I got Christ's hand with a nail through it. And I also got the thorns that were around his head on my arm. And what that symbolizes is that when I came to Christ, he took all this pain and suffering away from me. He took it away and made me brand new. God's the only way. He's the only way that's ever gonna fill you up. I've tried to fill myself up time and time again with the pleasures of this world, with the sex, the drugs, and power, money. And truth be told, the only thing that has ever filled me up and sustained me is God. And it's just an amazing feeling, because today I ain't chasing after nothing. Today I'm enjoying the process of where I've been and where he's taken me. And I get to enjoy that with my beautiful wife. So it's an incredible journey. And I'm really grateful to be a follower of Jesus, bottom line. He's a cool dude, and I'm thankful that he's my dad.
Jesus is always seeking out people who are not where they need to be. So I want to tell you a little story about somebody else who found their true identity. Last week, we looked at Saul, whose story, then he became Paul and went on to write a lot of the New Testament and plant a bunch of churches. This week, I want us to look in the New Testament of the Bible in the book of John, chapter 4. And this story is about a woman at a well. And she has an encounter with Jesus, because Jesus is always seeking people out who aren't where they need to be. So let me give you a little context of this story before we dive into it. Jesus is traveling through Samaria with his followers, his disciples. Jews detest Samaritans, and they won't have anything to do with people in Samaria. So the fact that Jesus is even there is kind of a big deal in this story. So Jesus and his followers decide to stop at this well. This well is called Jacob's Well, and it's around noon, about the hottest time of the day. Jesus sends his followers into town to look for some food, and he stays at the well to get some rest. Kinda. Now, this well isn't spring-fed. It's fed from rainwater and dew that runs off into the well and collects at the bottom. So you can imagine the water's probably doesn't taste that good, right? Wells at this time in history, most of them were located outside of town along the road. And twice each day, morning and evening, usually the women would go to the well and collect the water. But we run into this story of this woman, and she's going there at noon. And so you think, why would she be going at the hottest time of the day when there's probably no other women there, right? Well, she's probably going there to avoid maybe what she thinks her true identity is. Probably what the other women might think about her. So she wants to go where she won't run into people. So we're going to pick up the story now in chapter 4 at verse 4. Now Jesus, had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." And the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I don't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." Jesus told her, "Go call your husband and come back." She says, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." So we can tell by this story that Jesus knows her true identity, and he's really pointing out the lies that have been tattooed on her heart. The lie might be that she can't get a man to like her unless she has sex with them, or maybe that she's less than the other women because of her past. You know, because of whatever the lie is, it's forcing her to avoid people. She's got these strongholds that only the divine power of Jesus can destroy. So Jesus is telling her this extraordinary message about fresh and pure water that would quench her spiritual thirst forever. And we don't have time to really deep dive into this story, but this woman comes to believe that Jesus is who he says he is. And she goes from trying to avoid people to running into town and immediately sharing her experience of Jesus with others. Her strongholds are destroyed by the divine power of Jesus, and she begins to find her true identity. See, you are not who you think you are. And Jesus is always seeking people out who aren't where they need to be. You know, maybe you're here today because your spirit is crushed. Or maybe you're here today because your heart is broken. You think maybe you're too far gone for God, but they got a great breakfast. First, you have to take that lie captive. Then we have to confess the truth about who we are. Listen to what it says in the Old Testament in Psalm 34, verse 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he rescues those spirits whose spirits are crushed. See, God is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed. See, the truth is, you are a child of God. Everyone in here is a child of God, and you have been bought with a price. And God offers you forgiveness of all of your wrongs. You are a masterpiece of God, and you have been fearfully and wonderfully made and have been created to do good things. See, God will rescue you no matter what. The only catch is you have to let him. You have to invite God in and let him rescue you. And see, when we find a commandment, something that's a rule, something that we're supposed to follow in Scripture, we should obey it. And when the Bible tells us the truth about who we already are and what Jesus has already done, there's only one appropriate response to that, and that is to believe it. So identify the lie, take it captive, confess the truth of God, pray for his divine power to destroy that stronghold so that you can begin to live in your true identity, the identity that Jesus tattooed on you before you were even born. You are not who you think you are if you're believing the lies about you. You are who you think you are when you believe the truth about you. See, and Jesus is always seeking people out who aren't where they need to be. So the band's going to come up here, and they're going to sing some songs to God and for God and about God. And you can sit, you can stand. We'll put the words up here on the screen, and you can sing along. If today you just identified what that lie is, that stronghold that's got you, write it down on that Post-it note, stick it on one of these boards. Let's get rid of that. And while this first song plays, ask God to destroy those strongholds with his divine power so that you can begin to live in your true identity. We don't pass an offering bucket here. This is just our gift to you. You know, if Gateway is your church home, we've got buckets set up in the back and giving stations back there, and you can put your gift in there. We just want to reach more people who need to see their true identity in Jesus. And your gift, it helps us do that. We also have a website you can go to, and we'd love for you to visit there, and you can check out past messages. If you need somebody to pray for you right now, we've got people over here by the garage door and over here by the big banner that would love to pray with you and for you. Listen to these songs from the band.